Human rancher expected a mail-order wife, but an alien gunslinger outlaw took her place. The scorching desert sun beat down on Nick Wyatt's back as he hauled the last bucket of water to his cattle trough. Sweat trickled down his neck, soaking the collar of his gray tank top as he squinted across the barren landscape surrounding his modest ranch. The endless expanse of orange-red sand stretched toward the horizon, broken only by the occasional scrubby bush and the silhouette of the half-abandoned alien settlement a few miles in the distance. "What do you think, Blue?" Nick asked, glancing down at his Australian shepherd. The dog's tricolor coat shimmered in the heat as he panted happily, tail wagging. "Think she'll actually show up today?" Blue barked once, circling Nick's legs before darting toward the house, as if eager to prepare for their expected visitor. Nick chuckled, running a hand through his blonde hair. "Yeah, I'm nervous too, buddy." He'd spent 3 months exchanging messages with Illyri through the intergalactic matrimonial service. Her profile had caught his eye immediately. A refined Azurian woman with gentle eyes and a background in botany. Perfect for a lonely rancher trying to coax life from this unforgiving alien soil. The house wasn't much. A sturdy prefab structure with solar panels and a small garden he'd stubbornly maintained. But Nick had spent the entire morning making it presentable. Fresh sheets on the bed, floors swept. Even the windows had been cleaned until they gleamed in the harsh sunlight. After a quick shower, Nick stood before the small mirror in his bathroom, razor in hand. His reflection showed a strong jawline covered in 3 days' worth of stubble, and striking green eyes that his mother always said were his best feature. He carefully shaved, nicking himself only once in his nervousness. "It's just a marriage," he muttered to himself, "to a woman you've never met. From another planet, no big deal." The distant rumble of an approaching transport made Nick's heart leap into his throat. Blue began barking excitedly, racing to the front door. "Shit, she's early," Nick said, hastily wiping the remaining shaving cream from his face and pulling on a clean shirt. He ran a hand through his damp hair, took a deep breath, and stepped onto the porch just as the transport settled onto the dusty ground 50 yards from his home. The door hissed open, and Nick's practiced welcome died on his lips. This was definitely not Illyri. The woman who emerged from the transport was tall and lithe, with skin the color of the deepest ocean, an intense, vibrant blue that seemed to absorb the sunlight. Silver hair cascaded down her back in a wild tangle, framing a face that was all sharp angles and confidence. Her eyes, the same striking blue as her skin, but several shades brighter, locked onto Nick with an intensity that made his mouth go dry. She wore a dark chocolate leather corset that hugged her curves and plunged dangerously low, paired with form-fitting black pants tucked into high boots. Fingerless gloves covered her hands, and a wide-brimmed cowboy hat sat atop her head at a rakish angle. But what really caught Nick's attention was the gleaming revolver holstered at her hip, and the matching one she casually twirled in her right hand. "You, Nick Wyatt," she called, her voice carrying a musical accent he couldn't place. Nick nodded dumbly, one hand automatically reaching down to grab Blue's collar as the dog growled low in his throat. The woman strode toward him with the confident swagger of someone who owned whatever ground she walked on. She stopped at the foot of his porch steps, looking him up and down with undisguised interest. Well, she purred, holstering her weapon with a practiced flip. The catalog didn't mention how damn fine the merchandise was. "Lucky me," Nick found his voice. "You're not Illyri." A sharp laugh burst from her. "No shit, cowboy." She removed her hat with a flourish and gave a mocking bow. "Kira Talon at your service. And before you ask, yes, I took your bride's place. No, she's not coming. And yes, the authorities are looking for me." Nick's hand instinctively moved toward the shotgun he kept mounted by the door, but Kira's eyes tracked the movement, and her smile turned dangerous. "I wouldn't," she said softly. "I'm faster than you think." Nick froze, his mind racing. What happened to Illyri? Kira shrugged, climbing the steps until she stood directly in front of him. She smelled like leather and gunpowder, and something alien he couldn't identify. "Nothing bad if that's what you're worried about. I paid her to let me take her place. She's probably halfway to the Centauri colonies by now, living it up on my credits." She leaned closer, her blue eyes dancing with mischief. "I needed to disappear, And what better way than to become a mail-order bride headed to the middle of nowhere? Nick's gaze flicked to the photograph in his pocket, the gentle-eyed Azurian woman he'd been expecting, then back to the armed, dangerous-looking alien currently invading his personal space. "The sheriff in town has a standing reward for fugitives," he said carefully. Kira's smile didn't waver, but her hand drifted casually toward her holster. "And how much is that reward worth to you, cowboy?" "Enough to die for." Before Nick could answer, the distant whine of approaching engines cut through the air. Kira's head snapped around, her body tensing. "Damn it," she hissed. "They followed me." She turned back to Nick, all playfulness gone from her expression. "Decision time, handsome. Turn me in and collect your reward, or help me, and I'll make it worth your while." Nick looked from the approaching vehicles to the dangerous alien woman on his porch. His quiet, predictable life had just become anything but. "Get inside," he said, making a decision that would change everything. "And keep your damn guns holstered in my house." "Inside. Now," Nick repeated, practically shoving Kira through his front door as the approaching engines grew louder. Blue darted in after them, hackles raised. "You're making the right choice, cowboy," Kira said, her voice dropping to a husky whisper as she brushed past him. Her shoulder grazed his chest, and Nick caught another whiff of that strange, intoxicating scent, like desert lightning and exotic spices. "I haven't made any choice yet," he growled, closing the door and moving to the window. "Just buying time to think." 3 sleek hovercrafts approached, kicking up clouds of orange dust as they cut across the desert. They weren't the bulky local law enforcement vehicles Nick was familiar with. These were streamlined, predatory machines with tinted viewports and weapon mounts. "Bounty hunters," Kira said, appearing at his shoulder. She'd removed her hat, and her silver hair cascaded around her shoulders like liquid mercury. "Nasty ones. By the look of those rigs." "What the hell did you do?" Nick demanded, turning to face her. Kira's blue eyes flashed. "Nothing they wouldn't have done themselves given half the chance?" She glanced around the small living room, taking in the modest furnishings. "Nice place. Very rustic." It's not much, but it's mine," Nick replied, watching as she prowled around his home like a curious cat. "And you're avoiding my question?" Before she could answer, the hovercrafts pulled up outside, engines powering down with a whine. Nick counted 5 figures disembarking, all different alien species, all heavily armed. "Shit," he muttered. "They look serious." Kira moved to his side again, peering through the window. "That's Drav leading them. The big one with the tentacle beard, he's Octavian. Mean bastard." Nick felt his stomach knot. Octavians were known for their ruthlessness and their ability to track prey across entire star systems. If one was after Kira, she must have done something truly significant. A heavy pounding on the door made Blue bark frantically. "Quiet, boy," Nick commanded, his mind racing. He turned to Kira. "I need to know what I'm getting into here." "Quick version." Kira's confident facade cracked slightly. "I stole something valuable, but not from them, from the syndicate they work for." She stepped closer, her voice dropping. "I can help you, Nick. Your ranch is struggling. I can see it in the state of your equipment, the condition of your cattle." Nick's eyes narrowed. "How would you know anything about ranching?" A slow smile spread across her face. "I grew up on an agricultural colony. My parents were terraformers. I know more about making things grow in hostile environments than anyone in this sector." The pounding came again, harder this time. "Wyatt! We know you're in there," a gravelly voice called out. "We just want the Azurian. Hand her over and there won't be trouble." Nick looked at Kira skeptically. "You're not even Azurian." "Details," she shrugged. "Look, I can prove what I'm saying. You're south field. The soil's too alkaline. That's why your crops keep failing. I can fix that. And your cattle, they're suffering from mineral deficiencies. I can help them too." Nick was stunned. He'd been struggling with exactly those issues for months. "Last chance, Wyatt!" the voice outside bellowed. Making a split-second decision, Nick grabbed Kira's arm. "Follow my lead," he whispered, then raised his voice. "Coming." He opened the door, keeping one hand on Blue's collar. The 5 bounty hunters stood in a semicircle, weapons not quite drawn, but clearly ready. The leader, Drav, towered over the others, his tentacle beard writhing slightly as he spoke. "Where is she?" he demanded without preamble. Nick adopted his most confused expression. "Who?" "Don't play dumb human," one of the others snarled, a reptilian with scales that shifted color with his agitation. "The Azurian female who arrived on that transport." He pointed to the ship still sitting in Nick's yard. "You mean my wife?" Nick said, stepping aside to reveal Kira, who had somehow managed to muss her hair and remove her weapons in the brief interval. She'd also unbuttoned Nick's flannel shirt that had been hanging by the door and slipped it on over her corset, giving the impression of a woman hastily dressed after being interrupted. "Sorry for the delay," she said, her voice suddenly softer, her accent more pronounced. She slid up next to Nick and wrapped an arm around his waist, pressing herself against his side. "We were celebrating our union." Nick's body reacted instantly to her proximity, and he had to force himself to focus on the threat before them, rather than the feel of her curves against him. Drav's eyes narrowed, tentacles twitching suspiciously. "You registered for a mail-order bride. An Azurian named Illyri Voss." "That's me," Kira said with a sweet smile that looked completely foreign on her face. "Illyri Talon now, I suppose." She looked up at Nick with an expression of such adoration that even he almost believed it. "She doesn't look like the image in the catalog," the reptilian said. "Those are always outdated," Nick replied smoothly, slipping his arm around Kira's shoulders. "Besides, would you complain if your bride looked better than advertised?" This drew chuckles from 2 of the bounty hunters in the back. Drav wasn't convinced. "If you're really his bride, where are your registration documents?" "Still being processed," Nick answered. "You know how slow intergalactic bureaucracy can be." "We're looking for a fugitive," Drav continued. "An Azurian with distinctive markings and skills. Mind if we come in and look around?" Nick felt Kira tense beside him. "Actually, I do mind," he said firmly. "This is my property, and unless you've got a warrant from local authorities, you've got no right to search it." The standoff stretched for several tense seconds before Drav finally took a step back. "We'll be watching," he warned. "And when we prove she's not who she claims to be, we'll be back. With a warrant." As the bounty hunters reluctantly returned to their vehicles, Nick maintained his protective stance, one arm around Kira. Only when the hovercrafts disappeared over the horizon did he release her and step away. "That was close," he muttered. Kira turned to him, her eyes bright with adrenaline and something else, something that made Nick's pulse quicken. "You were magnificent," she said, her voice husky, a natural liar. "I wasn't lying about everything," Nick replied, his gaze dropping to where his shirt hung open over her corset. "My ranch is struggling, if you really can help with that." "I can," she assured him, stepping closer again. "And I always pay my debts, cowboy." The air between them seemed to crackle with electricity as she reached up to trace a finger along his jawline. "So," she murmured, "should we continue celebrating our union?" "For authenticity's sake, of course." Nick caught her wrist, his green eyes meeting her blue ones. "First, you tell me exactly what you stole and who's after you. Then we'll talk about celebrations." Kira's smile was both dangerous and alluring. "Fair enough, husband. It's going to be a long night of talking." Blue whined softly from his spot by the door, as if sensing that his master's quiet life had just become infinitely more complicated and interesting. Night fell quickly on the desert planet, bringing with it a chill that seemed impossible after the day's blistering heat. Nick stoked the fire in the small hearth, while Kira sat cross-legged on his worn couch, her weapons disassembled on the coffee table as she cleaned each part with practiced precision. "So," Nick said, settling into the armchair across from her, "time to talk." Kira's fingers never stopped moving, even as she met his gaze. "What I stole is called the Genesis Protocol. It's terraforming technology, but not like anything that's been made public." "Terraforming?" Nick leaned forward. "Like what the first colonists used to make this dust ball habitable?" "Child's play compared to this." Kira reassembled one revolver with lightning speed. The current terraforming tech takes decades, sometimes centuries to transform a planet. The Genesis protocol can do it in months. Imagine turning this entire desert green in a single growing season. Nick whistled low. That would change everything. Who developed it? The Syndicate. Kira's expression darkened. They're not just criminals. They're a corporate empire with their tentacles in everything from mining to pharmaceuticals. The official company is called Novagen, but everyone in the outer systems knows who really runs it. And why did you steal it? Kira paused, her hands finally going still. Because they tested it on my home colony, promised to make our world a paradise. Her voice hardened. Instead, they used us as guinea pigs for an early version. It worked too well, too fast. The rapid plant growth released something from the soil. A pathogen. Nearly everyone died within weeks. Nick's stomach tightened. I'm sorry. I survived because I was off-world, training with a colonial defense force. She resumed cleaning her second weapon. When I came back, I found what they'd done. Spent the next 3 years working my way into their organization, getting close to their research division. Then I took everything, the protocol, the research data, and most importantly, the proof that they knew about the risk before they tested it on my people. The pieces clicked into place for Nick. That's why they sent bounty hunters instead of going through legal channels. They can't risk you exposing what they did. Exactly. Kira holstered both weapons and leaned back. But that's not all I took. She reached into her boot and pulled out a small metallic cylinder no bigger than her thumb. This is the Genesis seed. One application can transform 5 acres of barren land into fertile soil within days. Nick stared at the unassuming object. And you know how to use it? A slow smile spread across Kira's face. I told you I grew up on an agricultural colony. My parents were the lead terraformers. I've been playing with soil composition since I could walk. She tossed the cylinder to him. But that's not all I can do. Before Nick could ask what she meant, a soft glow emanated from Kira's fingertips. The blue of her skin seemed to intensify as the light spread up her arms. Azurians are touch telepaths, she explained, the light dancing between her fingers. But my mother was Lumidian. I inherited this from her. Bioluminescent energy manipulation. I can sense the chemical composition of soil, water, even living tissue. That's how I knew about your cattle's mineral deficiencies the moment I arrived. Nick watched, mesmerized, as she directed the soft light toward one of his houseplants. The wilting leaves straightened, the brown edges greening before his eyes. That's incredible, he breathed. It's why the Syndicate wants me back so badly, she said, letting the glow fade. I'm not just a thief. I'm the only one who can use the protocol to its full potential without causing another disaster. A sharp knock at the door interrupted them. Blue leapt up, barking a warning. Expecting company? Kira asked, her hands moving to her holsters. Nick shook his head, moving cautiously to the window. He peered through the curtains and cursed under his breath. It's Sheriff Mardox, he muttered. Local law enforcement. Kira was on her feet instantly. Bounty hunters work fast. They must have tipped him off. No, I don't think so, Nick said, watching the lone figure on his porch. Mardox is Taurian. They're sticklers for procedure. If the bounty hunters had contacted him officially, he'd have brought deputies. Then why is he here? Nick grimaced. Probably checking out rumors of my new wife. This is a small community. News travels fast. Another knock, more insistent this time. Wyatt, open up. I know you're in there. Nick turned to Kira. We need to keep up the charade. Follow my lead. He opened the door to reveal a tall, broad-shouldered alien with leathery gray skin and small horns protruding from his forehead. Sheriff Mardox wore the traditional tan uniform of frontier law enforcement, a pulse pistol holstered at his hip. Evening, Sheriff, Nick said casually. What brings you out this way so late? Mardox's yellow eyes narrowed. Heard you got yourself a mail-order bride, Wyatt. Wanted to see for myself. His gaze shifted past Nick to where Kira stood. This her? Illyri Talon, Kira said, stepping forward with a smile that was both demure and challenging. Pleasure to meet you, Sheriff. Mardox studied her with obvious suspicion. Funny, transport logs show an Illyri Voss arriving today. That was my maiden name, Kira replied smoothly. I took my husband's name immediately, of course. "Of course," Mardox echoed, unconvinced. "Mind if I come in?" Before Nick could object, the sheriff stepped past him into the house. His eyes immediately went to the weapons on the coffee table. "Quite an arsenal for a new bride," he commented. Nick moved to Kira's side, slipping an arm around her waist. The contact sent a jolt through him that had nothing to do with their charade. "My wife grew up on the frontier," he explained. "She knows how to handle herself." "I bet she does," Mardox said dryly. He turned to face them directly. "Got a report about some bounty hunters causing trouble out this way earlier. You know anything about that?" "They were looking for someone," Nick admitted, "but they left when they realized they had the wrong place." Mardox's expression remained impassive. "Uh-huh. And they just happened to show up on the same day as your bride?" "Coincidence," Kira said with a shrug that drew Nick's attention to the curve of her shoulder where his shirt had slipped down. The sheriff looked between them, his gaze lingering on Nick's hand at Kira's waist, the way they stood together. Something in his posture relaxed slightly. "Well, I'll be checking those transport logs more thoroughly tomorrow," he said finally, "and I'll be keeping an eye on you too." "We'd expect nothing less, Sheriff," Nick replied. As Mardox turned to leave, he paused at the door. "One more thing. There's a storm coming in from the eastern ridge. Big one. You might want to secure your livestock." After the sheriff departed, Nick and Kira remained standing close together, neither quite ready to break the contact. "He didn't believe us," Kira murmured. "No," Nick agreed, "but he didn't arrest you either." Their eyes met, and the tension that had been building between them since her arrival crackled in the air. Nick became acutely aware of the warmth of her skin beneath his fingers, the subtle scent that was uniquely hers. "We should check on those cattle," Kira said, her voice husky, "before the storm hits." "Yeah," Nick replied, not moving. "We should, Outside, the wind began to howl across the desert, but neither of them noticed as the distance between them slowly disappeared. The wind howled like a wounded beast as Nick and Kira raced across the darkening ranch yard. The first stinging pellets of sand struck their faces as the storm front approached from the eastern ridge, a massive wall of swirling orange dust illuminated by flashes of dry lightning. "We need to get the cattle into the shelter," Nick shouted over the rising gale, pointing toward a low reinforced building at the edge of his property. Kira nodded, her silver hair whipping wildly around her face. She changed into a pair of Nick's old work pants and boots, his flannel shirt still hanging loosely from her shoulders. Despite the circumstances, Nick couldn't help but admire how she made even his worn clothes look good. "I'll take the north side," she called back, already sprinting toward the scattered herd. Blue raced alongside her, responding to her commands as if they'd worked together for years. Nick watched in amazement as Kira moved with fluid grace among his nervous cattle. Where he expected the animals to balk at the unfamiliar, blue-skinned woman, they instead seemed drawn to her. As she approached each one, her fingertips glowed with that soft, bioluminescent light, and the cattle calmed immediately, following her guidance toward the shelter. Working together, they managed to herd the last of the animals inside, just as the full force of the storm hit. Nick secured the heavy doors while Kira moved among the cattle, her hands still glowing as she checked each one. "They're dehydrated," she said, her voice barely audible above the storm's fury. "And the mineral deficiency is worse than I thought. This one, especially." She gestured to an older cow that had been struggling for weeks. Nick wiped sand from his eyes. "Nothing I haven't tried to fix. The local supplements don't work right with earthstock cattle." Kira's eyes gleamed in the dim light of the shelter. "I can help them. But first," she pulled something from her pocket, a small device no bigger than a coin. "Found this under your porch while you were gathering supplies." Nick took it from her, examining the sleek metal disc. "What is it?" "Tracking beacon, syndicate issue." Her expression hardened. "The bounty hunters must have planted it during their visit. They're monitoring us." A chill that had nothing to do with the weather ran down Nick's spine. "How long do we have?" "Not long. The storm might interfere with the signal. Buy us some time." She took the beacon back, crushing it between her fingers with surprising strength. "But they'll come when it stops transmitting. They'll know we found it." Nick ran a hand through his sand-dusted hair. "So we've got until the storm passes." "Then what?" Kira's smile was fierce. "Then we give them something they don't expect. She pulled the Genesis seed from her boot. I'm done running, Nick. This technology belongs to the people, not corporations. Starting with you. Outside, the storm raged with increasing intensity, the wind screaming as it tore at the shelter's reinforced walls. Inside, the air between them seemed equally charged. Why me? Nick asked, stepping closer to her. You could have hidden anywhere. The transport was headed here anyway. It was convenient, but something in her eyes told him there was more to it. And, he pressed. Kira hesitated, then sighed. And I researched you before I came. Human settlers are rare out here, but you've survived 5 years on your own, built something from nothing. Her blue eyes met his. Humans have a reputation, you know. Stubborn, adaptable, impossible to break. That's not always true, Nick said, thinking of the failed harvests, the dying cattle, the nights he'd considered giving up. It is with you, she insisted. I've watched you today. The way you faced down those bounty hunters, how you handled the sheriff. You're exactly what I need. For what? For this. She held up the Genesis seed. I need someone who can protect this technology once I'm gone. Someone who will use it to help people, not exploit them. Nick frowned. What do you mean, once you're gone? The syndicate won't stop hunting me, she said matter-of-factly. But if I can implement the protocol here, prove it can work safely, create a public record of its success? She shrugged. Maybe my death will mean something. No one's dying, Nick said firmly, taking her by the shoulders. Not you, not me. We'll figure this out. Their eyes locked, and for a moment, the howling storm and the danger pursuing them seemed to fade away. Nick became acutely aware of her warmth beneath his hands, the way her pulse quickened at his touch. Without conscious thought, he drew her closer. Why do humans do that? She murmured, her gaze dropping to his lips. Do what? Rush in to save people you barely know? Take on fights that aren't yours? Nick smiled slightly. Maybe it's in our DNA. It's fascinating, she whispered, her hands coming to rest against his chest. On my world, we're taught to calculate every risk, weigh every alliance. But humans, you just feel and act. Is that bad? He asked, his voice rough. No, she breathed. It's intoxicating. The distance between them vanished as their lips met in a kiss that started gentle but quickly blazed into something more urgent. Her skin was warmer than a human's, almost feverish to the touch, and Nick found himself drowning in sensations he'd never experienced before. The unique taste of her, alien yet perfect. The soft glow that emanated from her skin wherever they touched, bathing them in gentle blue light. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Kira looked up at him with wonder. That was, yeah, Nick agreed, his heart pounding. A particularly violent gust rattled the shelter, bringing them back to reality. Kira stepped back slightly, though her hands remained on his chest. We should focus on the cattle first, she said, though her eyes told a different story. Then I'll show you what the Genesis seed can do. Nick nodded, reluctantly releasing her. What do you need? Kira moved to the old cow she'd identified earlier, her hands beginning to glow more intensely. Water and whatever minerals you have, I can synthesize what's missing. As Nick gathered the supplies, he watched her work. The bioluminescence spread from her hands into the animal's body, following the path of its bloodstream in a mesmerizing display of light. How are you doing that? He asked, setting down a bucket of water. Lumidians can manipulate energy at the cellular level, she explained, her concentration never wavering. I'm stimulating her system to better absorb nutrients, correcting imbalances. The cow, which had been listless for weeks, began to perk up visibly. Its dull coat seemed to regain some luster, and it lowed softly, pushing its head against Kira's hands. That's incredible, Nick said, genuinely impressed. Kira's smile was both proud and sad. My mother could heal entire herds at once. I inherited only a fraction of her abilities. It's enough, Nick assured her, moving to help with the next animal. They worked side by side as the storm continued to rage. Kira treating each animal while teaching Nick what to look for, how to mix supplements that would work with Earth stock cattle in this alien environment. Their hands brushed frequently, each contact sending sparks through Nick's body. building a tension that had nothing to do with the storm outside. By the time they finished, the worst of the gale seemed to be passing. The wind's howl had diminished to a low moan, and the impacts against the shelter walls came less frequently. "Storm's dying down," Nick observed, wiping sweat from his brow. "What now?" Kira's expression turned serious. "Now we prepare. The Syndicate will send more than bounty hunters when they realize I've destroyed their tracker." She held up the Genesis seed. "But first, let me show you what this can do." As they stepped toward the shelter doors, Kira suddenly stopped, turning to face Nick. Her blue eyes seemed to glow in the dim light. "Whatever happens next," she said softly, "I want you to know that coming here wasn't just convenient. When I researched potential hiding places, I saw your face in the catalog and just knew." Before Nick could respond, she reached up and pulled him down for another kiss, this one filled with promise and heat and something that felt dangerously like hope. Dawn broke over the desert, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. The storm had left everything coated in a fine layer of orange dust, but the air was clean and still. Nick and Kira stood at the edge of his most barren field, a patch of land he'd tried and failed to cultivate for 3 seasons. "This is perfect," Kira said, kneeling to scoop up a handful of sandy soil. Her fingers glowed faintly as she let the grains fall. "Poor in nutrients, but rich in base minerals. The Genesis seed will have plenty to work with." Nick watched her, still marveling at how different this morning felt from yesterday. Last night, after they'd secured the cattle and returned to the house, they'd given in to the attraction that had been building between them, the memory of her luminescent skin against his. The way she'd whispered his name sent a rush of warmth through him even now. "You're staring," Kira noted, without looking up, a smile in her voice. "Can't help it," Nick replied honestly. "Never seen anything like you before." She glanced up, her blue eyes sparkling. "That's what you said last night, too." Before Nick could respond, Blue barked a warning from the porch. They both turned to see a cloud of dust approaching from the direction of town. "Visitors," Nick muttered, shading his eyes. "Multiple vehicles." Kira stood quickly. "We need to do this now. Once it's started, they can't stop it without destroying the evidence of what the protocol can do." She pulled out the Genesis seed, twisting the top to reveal a sharp point. "This needs to go directly into the soil, about 6 inches deep. Then we activate it and step back. Way back." Nick took the device from her, studying it. "How fast does it work?" "You'll see," she promised, her expression a mix of excitement and determination. "But we need to hurry." Nick drove the seed into the ground at the center of the field, while Kira tapped a sequence into the exposed end. A soft hum emanated from the device, and the ground around it began to vibrate subtly. "Now we run," Kira said, grabbing his hand. They sprinted back toward the house, reaching the porch just as the approaching vehicles came into view. Sheriff Murdoch's cruiser in the lead, followed by 2 civilian transports. "Looks like the sheriff brought company," Nick observed grimly. Kira's eyes narrowed. "Not just any company." She pointed to the second transport. "See that insignia? Novagen Corporate Security. The Syndicate's here." As if to confirm her words, the transport's door slid open, and several armed figures emerged. At their center stood a tall, imposing alien with scaled skin the color of burnished copper and eyes like polished obsidian. "Vox," Kira hissed, her hand instinctively moving to her holster. "Head of Syndicate operations in this sector, and my former commanding officer." "You know him?" Nick asked, surprised. "I told you I worked my way into their organization," she replied, her voice tight. "He recruited me, trained me. Thought he was grooming me for leadership." Her laugh was bitter. "He never suspected I was just waiting for access to the protocol." Sheriff Murdoch approached the house first, his expression grim. "Wyatt!" "We need to talk." Nick stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Kira. "What's this about, Sheriff? And why'd you bring a corporate security team to my property?" Murdoch's yellow eyes flicked between them. "These gentlemen claim your wife stole proprietary technology. They have documentation and a warrant for her arrest." "That's a lie," Kira called out. "And you know it, Vox." The copper-skinned alien stepped forward, his movements fluid and predatory. He was dressed in an immaculate black uniform that screamed authority, a sleek energy weapon holstered at his hip. Kira, he said, his voice surprisingly melodic for such a dangerous-looking creature. You've led us on quite a chase, and time to come home. This isn't about stolen technology, Kira told the sheriff. It's about covering up a massacre. They tested their proprietary technology on my home colony. Killed everyone. Vox sighed as if dealing with a petulant child. Always so dramatic. There were unfortunate casualties, yes, but progress requires sacrifice. Tell that to my family, Kira snarled. Sheriff Mardox looked uncertain. I've got a legal warrant, Wyatt. Don't make this difficult. Nick stood his ground. Show me the warrant. Let me see exactly what it says. As the sheriff reluctantly produced the document, a low rumbling sound came from the field behind them. The ground began to tremble more noticeably. What's that? One of the syndicate's security team asked, raising his weapon. Vox's obsidian eyes widened in realization. She's activated the protocol! Stop her! But it was too late. The barren field erupted in a wave of green, spreading outward from the center point where they'd planted the seed. Plants sprouted, grew, and matured in seconds. Desert grasses, hardy shrubs, and even small trees pushing up through the once lifeless soil. The transformation moved like a living tide, racing toward the edges of the field. Everyone, even Vox's security team, stood transfixed by the miraculous sight. In less than a minute, what had been dead earth was now a lush, vibrant ecosystem. That's impossible, Sheriff Mardox breathed. That's the Genesis Protocol, Kira replied proudly. Terraforming technology that could end hunger and drought across the galaxy. And they want to keep it for themselves, weaponize it. Vox recovered quickly, his expression hardening. Arrest her, he ordered his team, and seize all evidence of the protocol's deployment. Wait, Nick said, stepping between them and Kira. Sheriff, you need to see this. He held out a small data chip. Everything Kira stole includes proof of what they did to her colony, the test results, the casualty reports, the cover-up, all of it. Mardox hesitated, looking from the chip to the transformed field and back to Vox's increasingly angry face. This is a syndicate matter, Vox hissed. Your jurisdiction ends where our interests begin, Sheriff. Actually, came a new voice, that's not how it works on my planet. Everyone turned to see a tall human male in a crisp colonial administration uniform approaching from the third transport. He wore the insignia of a planetary governor, and his stern expression brooked no argument. Governor Walker, Sheriff Mardox said, straightening respectfully. I wasn't informed you'd be joining us. Nah, clearly, Walker replied dryly. He surveyed the scene, his gaze lingering on the transformed field. I received some very interesting data transmissions early this morning. Footage of a miraculous recovery of livestock using unknown technology, followed by this. He gestured to the green field. Care to explain, Mr. Vox? Vox's composure slipped for a moment before he recovered. This woman is a thief and a saboteur. She stole classified Novagan property and tested it publicly, demonstrating its capabilities for the good of all, Walker interrupted, which is fascinating since Novagen's official position is that such technology doesn't exist. He turned to Kira. You've been busy, Miss Talon. Or should I call you Lieutenant Commander Kira Nix of Colonial Intelligence? Nick turned to Kira in shock. What? A small smile played at the corners of Kira's mouth. I may have omitted a few details about my past. She's been deep cover for 3 years, Governor Walker explained, gathering evidence of syndicate activities, including their illegal weapons development program disguised as terraforming research. Vox's hand moved toward his weapon. This is absurd. You have no authority. Look, in a blur of motion too fast for most eyes to follow, Nick drew the shotgun he'd concealed behind the porch post and leveled it at Vox. I wouldn't, he said calmly. Humans might not look like much compared to your kind, but we're real quick when we need to be. Vox froze, his obsidian eyes calculating. Colonial Intelligence has been building a case against Novagen for years. Walker continued as if nothing had happened. Lieutenant Commander Nix provided the final evidence we needed. The warrants for your arrest, the real ones, are being processed as we speak. Sheriff Mardox looked between the governor and Vox, then made his decision. He unholstered his pulse pistol and pointed it at the syndicate leader. Vox, you and your men are under arrest for presenting falsified documents to a law enforcement officer, attempted illegal seizure of private property, and conspiracy to commit murder. As Marduk's deputies moved to secure the syndicate team, Kira stepped closer to Nick, her hand finding his. Colonial intelligence? He murmured, still processing. You're a spy? Was, she corrected, squeezing his hand. My mission's complete now. She nodded toward the transformed field. And I've got a new one, if you're interested. Before Nick could respond, Governor Walker approached them. Impressive work, both of you. The Genesis Protocol could revolutionize colonization efforts throughout the sector. He looked at Kira. The Colonial Administration would like to offer you a position overseeing its implementation. With appropriate compensation, of course. Kira glanced at Nick, a question in her eyes. That depends, she said. Would this position allow me to remain locally based? Walker smiled. I think we could arrange that. In fact, we'd like to designate this ranch as our first official testing facility. He turned to Nick. With your permission, Mr. Wyatt. As Fox and his team were led away in restraints, Nick looked from the governor to Kira, then to the miraculous green field beyond. His quiet life had been completely upended in less than 24 hours, but somehow he couldn't bring himself to mind. What do you think, Blue? He asked the dog sitting attentively at his feet. Blue barked once, tail wagging enthusiastically. Nick grinned. I think we're interested in hearing more about this offer, Governor. 3 months after the Genesis seed transformed Nick's barren field, the entire ranch was unrecognizable. Lush vegetation spreading carefully managed patterns across what had once been lifeless desert. Experimental crops thrived in neatly arranged plots, monitored by Colonial Administration scientists who came and went with clipboards and soil samples. Nick's cattle had doubled in number and health, their coats glossy under the desert sun. But the most remarkable transformation wasn't the land. It was the woman standing beside Nick on the newly built observation deck overlooking their property. Lieutenant Commander Kira Nix, Nick said, testing the name on his tongue as they watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Still doesn't sound right. Kira leaned against the railing, her silver hair caught in the gentle breeze. She'd traded her gunslinger outfit for more practical work clothes, though her revolvers were never far from reach. Old habits died hard. I've been Kira Talon longer than I've been Kira Nix these past few years, she admitted. Sometimes I forget which one is real. Nick moved behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. Her skin glowed faintly at his touch, a reaction she couldn't control around him. You're whoever you want to be now, he murmured against her neck. The mission's over. Vox and half the syndicate leadership are in custody. The Genesis protocols being implemented across 3 systems. Kira sighed, leaning back against his chest. That's the problem. For 3 years, I had one purpose. Infiltrate, gather evidence, expose the syndicate. Now, she turned in his arms to face him. What am I supposed to do with peace? Nick smiled. You could start by admitting you're not going anywhere. A flash of uncertainty crossed her features. The Colonial Administration has offered me a dozen positions. Research oversight, security consultant, training instructor. All off-world, Nick noted, his grip tightening slightly. All off-world, she confirmed. Governor Walker says my expertise is too valuable to waste on one ranch on one backwater planet. Nick studied her face, reading the conflict in her eyes. Is that what you want? To leave? I don't know what I want, she confessed, her voice uncharacteristically vulnerable. My entire adult life has been about the mission. First with the Colonial Defense Force, then undercover. I've never stayed in one place. With one person. She trailed off, her gaze dropping. With someone who loves you, Nick finished for her. Her eyes snapped back to his, wide with surprise. They'd shared his bed for months now, their bodies finding a harmony that transcended their different species, but neither had spoken those words. You don't even know me, she protested weakly. The real me. Don't I? Nick challenged. He reached up to brush a strand of silver hair from her face. I know you talk in your sleep, in at least 3 languages. I know you can't stand the taste of coffee, but drink it anyway because you like the smell. I know you're gentler with sick animals than you'd ever admit. His fingers traced the curve of her cheek. I know how your skin glows brighter when you're happy. How you still reach for your guns when there's an unexpected noise. How you've been secretly fixing up that old barn as a surprise for me. Kira's lips parted in surprise. How did you... Blue told me, Nick said with a grin, nodding toward the dog lounging at their feet. He's terrible at keeping secrets. A laugh escaped her, genuine and unguarded. Traitor, she told the dog, who thumped his tail happily against the deck. The point is, Nick continued, growing serious again, I may not know Lieutenant Commander Nix, but I know Kira, and that's who I fell in love with. The glow beneath her blue skin intensified, spreading up her neck and across her cheeks. It was the closest thing to a blush her species could manage. I've never had a home before, she whispered. Never wanted one. But this place... She glanced around at the transformed landscape. With you. Could be home, Nick finished. If you want it to be. Kira's expression shifted, her usual confidence returning. What about you? You signed up for a docile, mail-order bride, not a former undercover agent with a price on her head and a complicated past. Nick laughed. I signed up for companionship. Someone to share this place with. His green eyes locked with her blue ones. I got a partner instead. Someone who challenges me, surprises me, makes me better. He gestured to the thriving ranch around them. Look what we've built together in just 3 months. Imagine what we could do in years. Kira bit her lip, a very human gesture she'd picked up from him. Humans are strange, she said finally. Any other species would calculate the risks, weigh the practical considerations, but you just leap? Is that bad? Nick asked, echoing their conversation from that storm-swept night that seemed so long ago. No, she replied, her hands sliding up his chest. It's why I love you. The words hung in the air between them, her first admission of what they both had felt growing for weeks. Nick's heart hammered in his chest as he pulled her closer. Say that again, he murmured. I love you, Kira repeated more confidently this time. And I'm staying. If you'll have me. Their lips met in a kiss that sealed the promise, her skin illuminating them both in a soft blue glow as the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky. Later that night, as they lay tangled together in the darkness of their bedroom, Kira traced patterns on Nick's chest. There's something I need to show you, she said, her voice hushed in the quiet room. Something I've been working on. Nick propped himself up on one elbow, curious. More secret agricultural projects? She shook her head, a mysterious smile playing on her lips. Better, get dressed. They slipped out into the cool night air, Kira leading Nick by the hand toward the old barn she'd been renovating. Blue trotted alongside them, alert despite the late hour. Close your eyes, she instructed when they reached the doors. Nick complied, hearing the creak of the barn doors opening, feeling Kira's warm hand guiding him forward. Now look, she whispered. He opened his eyes to find the interior of the barn completely transformed. The old stalls had been removed, the space opened up and filled with workbenches, specialized equipment, and walls of data screens. At the center stood a large transparent chamber containing what looked like a miniature ecosystem, plants, soil, and tiny atmospheric regulators. What is this? Nick asked, amazed. Our future, Kira replied, her eyes bright with excitement. I've been working with Walker's team to develop a portable version of the Genesis protocol. Smaller scale, more controlled. She gestured to the chamber. This prototype can transform up to an acre at a time, with precise calibration for different environments. Nick walked around the chamber, examining it from all angles. You built this? With some help, she admitted. But the modifications are mine, based on what we learned from your field. She stepped closer, taking his hands. Walker doesn't know yet, but I'm going to propose a new division. Mobile terraforming units that can help struggling colonies and outposts across the sector. Teams that bring the technology to the people who need it most, not just wealthy corporate interests. And you want to lead this division? Nick asked, trying to keep the disappointment from his voice. Kira's smile widened. I want us to lead it. Together. She squeezed his hands. The ranch would be our base of operations. teams would train here, then deploy where needed. We'd oversee everything, but we'd stay home, together. The implications washed over Nick. You're talking about changing worlds. Starting with this one, she confirmed. What do you think? Nick looked around the lab, then back to the extraordinary woman before him, the gunslinger who had arrived on his doorstep and upended his life in the most unexpected and wonderful ways. I think, he said slowly, pulling her into his arms, that when I sent away for a mail-order bride, this wasn't what I had in mind. Kira laughed, the sound echoing through the barn. Disappointed? Not even a little, Nick assured her, capturing her lips with his. Humanity has a saying, sometimes the best things in life are unexpected. As they walked back to the house hand in hand under the twin moons, blue racing ahead of them, Nick marveled at how completely his life had changed. He'd wanted a companion to share his quiet existence, but instead found a partner to build something greater than either of them could have imagined alone. The ranch that had once been a lonely outpost in a harsh desert was now the beginning of something that would transform worlds across the galaxy. And at the heart of it all was the most unexpected bride a human rancher could have asked for, a blue-skinned alien gunslinger with a brilliant mind and a warrior's heart who had found her home in his arms.